Hi everyone, Rich Crescenti here with another in our series of videos, Making Music with Melodyne, and today we're going to be discussing dynamics, and more specifically how to control dynamics using Melodyne. Now, just like the rest of you, I use a lot of the same tools for dynamics. We use compressors, we use gates, we use limiters, we use automation, and we use those on individual instruments and even across the whole mix as well. And those all have their place, but they also all have limitations. There are things that they can't do. And Melodyne gives us a lot of power and flexibility to fit in those cracks right there, right at the things that those dynamics processors can't do. Melodyne has some very useful tools. So let's dive in and take a look at this today. I've brought two piano pieces into this session that more or less have problems on the opposite ends of the spectrum. One of them is very dynamic, that has very soft notes and then notes that swell up in volume as well. The other piece is heavily compressed, and because of that, there's some resonance and sustain that carries on longer than I would like it to. So let's take a look at this first piece today. It's called Everyone Dies in the End. It's a beautiful piano piece, and it is very dynamic. Here it is. Okay, really nice piece, very elegant, lots of dynamic range within there, very natural sounding. And I want to even out this performance a little bit. The problem with compression, in order using that, or even limiting, is that compressors and limiters can tend to pump a little bit or impart their own sound. And maybe I don't want to impart that sound. Maybe this one doesn't need the sound of compression right there. And so Melodyne to the rescue, especially with Melodyne 5, one of the brand new tools that we have is called the leveler macro. Now, if you look at the screen right here, if you're used to working within Melodyne, you'll see the standard macros that have been in here for a while, the pitch macro, the time macro, and now we have the leveler macro as well. Now, these are macros, which means they're designed to process either the whole song or a group of notes at once. And the new macro, the leveler macro, works the exact same way, but there is kind of a fundamental difference that I want to talk about real quick, and it actually makes this very, very powerful. So with the macros, like I said, it's designed to allow you to affect a group of notes at once, right? The correct pitch macro allows you to take whatever notes are selected and just move them closer to true center pitch. The timing macro allows you to take whatever notes are selected and move them closer to a grid or to a reference track, right? But those are absolute references. And the leveler macro works a little different. With the leveler macro, it takes whatever notes you have selected, analyzes them, and finds a true median volume right there. And then we have two sliders on either side to correct notes that are above or below. If you look at the left side right here, you see this slider that says make quiet notes louder. So that will take all of your notes that are below the median volume and bring them up. Same thing on the right hand side, make loud notes quieter. That takes every note that's above the median volume and brings it down. So more than the other macros, the selection of your notes right here is really, really important when using this macro. All right, but let's see what we can do right here. First thing I want to do is I'm just going to select all of the notes and change this just a little bit right here and show you what it can do, right? As we listen to this. All right, by bringing all those low notes up and bringing a few of the loud notes down right there, I've just evened out that performance. And I've brought some of that low energy, that low level energy, I brought it forward a little bit right there. But this is for every note of the song, so it's tough to use this as much as I would like to in certain areas because it's on every single note. So sometimes what I'll do is once I do a little bit of general correction, I can then go in and choose various areas or various notes and work on those specifically, right? Let's take a look at this right here. For example, I might look at this E, right? This E has some louder notes and then some notes that are a little bit softer right there. So if I select every note that's in that E range, I can now take the loud notes, or the soft notes, and bring them up a little bit right there, and bring those quiet notes down. Perfect. Now that won't work on the A, right? If we see the A is pretty consistent with its volume in terms of each one of those notes. But you might look at the G and see that it has some notes that are pretty loud, so I might select those two strings, for example, and then bring down the loud notes a little bit and bring up the soft notes. And now what we get is an evened out performance based on just those two strings. Right, now I haven't had to push anything too far. I was able to focus on the whole song and then zoom in on just the areas I wanted to touch right there. There are no other dynamics processors that can do that. Now, in certain cases, maybe the macro is a more powerful tool than you need. We still have our standard amplitude tool, so I could come to any two notes that I wanted and just grab those and just raise them up in amplitude a little bit right there. And now what we get is a very dynamic piece that sounds dynamic, has retained its tone and its feel, but we've just reined it in a little bit to make it translate a little bit better. The really nice part about this too is that if you wanted to use some compression afterwards, you won't have to push that compressor as far. You can just use it for its tone capabilities because you've done a lot of the pre-work ahead of time. All right, so let's look at the other example that we've got right here. Our other example is from a song we've used before called Whiskey Rebellion, right? And this one has a different problem. In order to get this piano to sit in the mix the way that I like, I had to compress it pretty hard. This song is much more high energy, it's much more impact, and it's got parts of the songs where things hit and then die away. And because of that resonance, the piano isn't dying away fast enough. Let's take a listen. You can really hear that hang on those extra notes right there where that resonance just holds on. So the leveler macro won't work here, but there is another tool that Melodyne has, which is within our sound editor, which is in Melodyne Studio version, the flagship version, and that is this dynamics slider right here. Now, the leveler macro takes all the notes you have and finds the median volume and allows you to adjust levels, notes above it and below it. But the dynamic slider right here in the sound editor works a little differently. This looks at each individual note and allows you to expand the dynamic range of that note or compress the dynamic range of that note right there. If you slide this to the right, dynamic range is going to expand. It's going to give you more dynamic range, which means low level energy or sustain is going to be brought down. If you bring this slider to the left, that low level energy is going to be brought up. So for things that don't have enough sustain, that might be useful. In this case, I'm trying to get rid of some sustain. So watch what happens when I bring this dynamic slider out a little bit right here and just increase the dynamic range, bringing that low level energy down, bringing the sustain down. We get much shorter sustain, which makes this piano fit better within the mix, and it gives it more impact and punch. Hope you've enjoyed this today. Thanks.